What if the deadliest epidemic in history turned out to be more than just a disease? What if all of that is a curse originating from dark forces? This is the beginning of the story of Season of the Witch. The movie begins with a dark, medieval atmosphere. On an old bridge, 3 women are led away with iron chains in their hands. Their faces are filled with fear, while the soldiers refer to them as witches. A priest stood before them, leading a ritual of judgment. He asked the women to swear that they were not followers of the devil. However, their answers were filled with cries, screams, and prayers for forgiveness. Even so, the priest was convinced that they carried a curse. With no mercy, he ordered that the women be hanged one by one, then their bodies dropped into the dark river. However, the priest knew death alone was not enough to stop the evil spirits. He ordered one of the bodies to be brought back for a final prayer. As he began to recite the exorcism prayer, the woman's eyes suddenly opened. With a blank but angry stare, she grabbed the priest by the neck and strangled him to death. This scene marks the beginning of a great terror, that demons are already free to roam the human world. After a gripping opening, the story moves into medieval times as a holy war rages on. We are shown a battlefield full of blood, screams, and clashing swords. 2 brave knights, Bayman and his friend Felson, appeared at the forefront. They fought valiantly, leading the Crusaders through the opposing defenses, their swords slashed without hesitation, their armor stained with enemy blood. Every victory was greeted with cheers, but underneath it was anxiety. Bayman began to feel something was wrong. In one of the battles, he saw not only enemy soldiers being killed, but also civilians, women, and children were trapped and victimized. Bayman's face changed. He began to question the purpose of the so-called holy war. Was this really God's will, or just a pretext for slaughter? Although he still fought gallantly, those doubts continued to haunt his heart. And this is where the seeds of Bayman's inner conflict began to grow, which would later lead him to leave the crusade and enter into the most dangerous mission of his life. Bayman and Felson's journey finally brought them back to their homeland. But the country they left behind has changed drastically. As the two passed through village after village, the sights they saw were horrifying. The streets were deserted, the houses were empty, and the smell of death permeated the air. Bodies lay on the side of the road, piled up without proper burial. A deadly plague known as the Black Plague has struck. People believe that this disease is not just a natural disaster, but a curse from the devil. Every corner of the village is filled with fears, prayers, and whispers about the dark magic that is the cause of all this. Bayman and Felson walked past a small church. There they saw the priests busy leading exorcism prayers, while the frightened congregation begged God for protection. But many of them had already lost hope. The atmosphere became even more tense when the two saw a cart passing by, carrying a pile of corpses that were about to be dumped into a mass grave. Starving children, women crying over the loss of their families, all became evidence of how this plague had destroyed everything. Along the way, Bayman and Felson realized one thing. They may have left the war behind, but they are now entering a much darker world, filled with mystery and despair. Shortly after entering the plague-ridden city, Bayman and Felson were captured by the royal troops. They were deemed deserters, traitors, who left the crusade without permission. With their hands bound, the two were led before an elderly church leader, Cardinal d'Ambroise. The cardinal himself looked seriously ill, his body weakened by the plague that had also spread to the palace. But before his death, he still had one last request. He believed that all these disasters were not ordinary illnesses, but the work of demonic forces. In front of Bayman and Felson, a young woman was brought in, chained and confined in an iron cage. Her gaze was sharp, yet full of mystery. The church accused the woman of being a witch who caused the Black Plague to spread throughout the country. The cardinal gave orders. The woman was to be escorted to a remote monastery called Severac. There is an ancient book that can break the power of darkness and stop curses. At first, Bayman refused. He saw that the girl looked scared, just like any other human being. To him, punishment without evidence was just another form of the brutality of the war he had left behind. But finally, after being assured that the girl would be tried in a fair manner at the monastery, Bayman agreed. In return, he and Felsen will be released from death row. But this decision, unbeknownst to them, will take them on their most dangerous journey yet, a mission full of mystery, betrayal, and terror, like they never imagined.
Who's that?
The witch.
Witch?
Bayman and Felsen now officially accepted the dangerous mission, but they did not set out alone. A small escort was prepared to accompany them on their journey to the Severac Monastery, located deep in the mountains. The woman accused of witchcraft was locked up in a heavy iron carriage. Throughout the journey, her eyes stared intently at everyone, as if she could read their hearts. At times, she looked frightened, but at other times, her gaze made people's hair stand on end. The first day of the journey was filled with silence. Only the sound of horses' hooves and the creaking of the carriage wheels on the rocky road could be heard. But tension was already beginning to mount. Some members of the group believed that the girl was merely the victim of false accusations, while others were convinced that she was the cause of all the disasters. When night fell, they camped in the forest. The campfire was lit, but it was still cold. From behind the bars of the train, the woman began to speak softly to Bayman. Her words sounded sweet, as if she wanted to persuade him and win his sympathy. The girl looked at Bayman with teary eyes, as if she were truly suffering. She said that she was not a witch, just a village girl who had been made the scapegoat for the disaster that had befallen the city. Bayman, whose heart was full of compassion, began to doubt all the stories about her. But at the same time, Debelzak woke up. He saw Bayman near the train and immediately warned him. "Don't believe the devil's words. He will use your weakness to destroy us all." The next morning, the group resumed their journey. The air felt heavy, and the overcast sky seemed to foreshadow something bad was about to happen. The path led them to an old bridge made of wood and stone that crossed a deep ravine. The bridge's wooden planks looked fragile, some of them already broken and rotten. The water below flowed rapidly and roared. Bayman walked ahead, making sure the bridge was safe to cross. Behind him, Felsen pushed the cart in which the girl was confined. Suddenly, a horse reared up for no reason. The animal neighed loudly and then fell into the ravine, shocking everyone. The wooden bridge shook even harder, but Bayman managed to pull her back just in time. Unfortunately, the bridge boards behind them collapsed, blocking their retreat. After successfully crossing the collapsed bridge, the group paused for a moment to calm themselves. Their breathing was still heavy, their hearts were beating fast, and the tension from the previous night had not yet subsided. They set up a small camp on the edge of the forest to rest. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound from behind the trees. Everyone was immediately on alert. But it wasn't a strange creature that appeared. It was a skinny wolf with glowing red eyes. The wolf stood there, staring intently at the girl and attacking as if it were being controlled. They felt the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. Bayman realized this was no coincidence. Something was drawing the creatures of the night closer to them. The sun began to rise, its rays piercing through the trees, but instead of providing warmth, the morning felt cold and heavy. After the terrible events of the previous night, all members of the group were on high alert. Debelzak convinced them to continue their journey to the monastery, where the Holy Book of the Cross was kept, the only way to seal away the evil power. But in their hearts, they all began to doubt whether they would survive to reach their destination. The woman walked calmly among them. Her gaze was sharp, as if she was enjoying their suffering one by one. They finally arrived at the monastery, but the place was quiet, too quiet. When they entered, they found the monks dead, their bodies scattered as if attacked by an invisible force. In the main room, they found the Book of the Cross placed on the altar. But before de Belzac could read the sacred verses, the demon completely released itself from the woman's body. The woman's body floated, then shattered into its true form as a demon, a black-winged creature with a terrifying face and a voice echoing from all directions. The final battle began. The demons attacked with great force. The monastery walls collapsed one by one. Felsen charged forward first, attacking with his sword while shouting, "Let's end this!" Kay tried to lure the demon's attention, while de Belzac recited verses to exorcise it. But the demon was too powerful. De Belzac ended up severely injured, but before breathing his last breath, he managed to complete part of the sealing prayer. Felsen gave Bayman time to get closer. A brutal fight ensued. Felsen ultimately fell in battle, but his death was not in vain. He created an opening for Bayman and Kay to carry the Book of the Cross to the altar. Bayman realized there was only one way to defeat this demon: recite the prayer while holding it down. He hugged the demon from behind and shouted to Kay, "Read the prayer to the end!" The demon roared, trying to break free, but Bayman did not give up. Kay continued his prayer in a loud voice. A white light enveloped the entire room, and the demon's screams echoed loudly, until finally its body exploded into ash. With his last breath, the severely wounded Bayman looked at Kay and the woman who was now free from the devil's influence. "Protect her," he said softly. Then his eyes closed forever. At the end of the story, Kay buried Bayman and Felsen outside the monastery, paying his last respects to the two knights who willingly sacrificed their lives for the world. The woman, now freed from the demon, thanked him with tears in her eyes. They both left the monastery slowly. The world was still ravaged by plague, but the main darkness had been defeated. Every legend has its own beginning, and every sacrifice creates hope. In the deepest darkness, even a small light is enough to defeat the devil. If you like this storyline, don't forget to watch the full version of the movie, and get ready for the next dark tale.